Okay, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we actually have a little bit of a different episode. Recently, I've gotten more requests to maybe shoot a couple episodes more focused on watch straps. So I figured best place to start would be on NATO's. And for this particular video, we'll be featuring NATO straps from Wrist Candy Watch Club, and I'm going to actually cover a couple of their kind of design features, which I think are really unique and very cool, and slightly different than the average NATO you're going to find out there. So I kind of have two different watches that's here. I got this one from Mark & Sons, which is more of the marine chronometer style watch, and then of course the very popular Mako USA 2 from Orient. So just to kind of show you the versatility, one, of NATO straps in general, and the, you know, a more dress casual type watch as well as a more sporty watch, and also to kind of highlight you know, a very unique feature about the Wrist Candy Watch Club NATOs, which I think is really great. So a little bit about Wrist Candy Watch Club. They're definitely a very cool current brand who is involved, you know, they're very involved with YouTube channels, Instagram, Facebook groups. You know, they definitely want to connect to their target demographic, and they're not ashamed to go out there and try to do that. So you've seen a lot of really cool collaborations, you know, with the Bruce Williams NATO that he did, with kind of the Seiko nickname, and I think it's great. It kind of has that nice loom colored design, which ties in really nice to the Seiko Lumibright, as well as the TGV NATO, which has that really cool crest design. Really nice. I hope to eventually collaborate with Wrist Candy Watch Club to put out, you know, maybe a specific average bros NATO, or even just I think I really like the idea of it being a watch club. So I don't know, maybe even some type of subscription box where you get different NATOs or something like that, you know, selected by me once a month. I think that could be really cool. So just throwing that out there if you're listening, Wrist Candy. So let's go ahead and get into this. Let's zoom out a little bit and pick these up and kind of get a better look at what we have here. So the Mark & Sons watch is a 20 millimeter, whereas the Orient is a 22. So as you can see, you know, there is visually a difference between 20 and 22, and of course I lean towards the 20 for the more dressy style, and then 22 for the more sporty. So let's go ahead and start out. We'll pick this up here, and one of the really cool features that I like about these is that they actually, the hardware, as you can see, is kind of a mixture of the normal NATO hardware, as well as, you know, which normally is kind of classified as Zulu hardware. So it's rounded off as rings versus more, you know, the flat kind of square shaped keepers, which I think is really cool and actually makes the straps even more versatile than your average NATO. Also, what a nice feature is, as you can see, they can lay different ways, which is really nice, right? These NATOs are 11.5 inches long, and you know, most that you're going to find out there are less than 11. You know, I'm really a stickler for 12-inch NATOs, but because of this feature here, I don't even think Wrist Candy knows about it. I don't think they're really pushing this, but because of this feature where these can kind of lay, you actually have more room to play, and the way they place these is close enough to where even, and as you're going to see, you know what, let's do this. Let's go ahead and get this on. I'll do this in front of the camera, so for those of you who aren't huge NATO wearers, you can kind of see how this is done. And then basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to loop it through here. Okay, then I'm going to loop it back. So one of the reasons why I really like having longer NATOs is because I want to be able to tuck the material back in really nice and cleanly, right? I want it to be able to be kind of held in place here. And one of the really cool things that Wrist Candy Watch Club has done is, because these can be moved, what you can do is it gives you room to, right? Which is nice. I mean, it's just a simple thing. And it's, I just think it's an outstanding feature, right? So depending on the length, right? Because one of my main reasons for wanting more length is I want to be able to have it loop all the way through. The worst is when it can loop right through here and it can just like fold halfway there. It's like, what's going to happen to that tongue? You can loop it inside, but I mean, to me, I just like to have it laying nice and flush. So with this, look, so if it's even shorter, you could lay it and it would hold the tongue down there. It's a little bit longer, you can have it laying down there. So for me, that's really an awesome feature and a selling point that I don't think Wrist Candy Watch Club has even realized yet. So very cool design feature there, and I think it's something that should really be told more about, because you know, similar to watch sizes, right, and dimensions, the specs can be a little deceiving, right? So for me, normally I would stay away. Well, it's not a 12-inch NATO. You know, I like to have my, you know, the strap material be able to go all the way through the keepers. But because they put the keepers a little bit closer together and then also give you, you know, a little bit more versatility as far as how you can fold it, right? You can even fold that one forward and push this down more. It just, it's really cool. So I gotta say, very impressed by that. So one of the another things that's kind of a standout feature about these is the material of the nylon. It's just really soft. And the finishings on here, as far as the edges and everything like that, it's just really nicely done. Honestly, you pull these off and they just still look new. So you pull it off of your watch and it's just, the way it's the I don't know really how to describe it, but it just feels like new afterwards, which is really nice. Because, you know, of course, most NATOs, they are made out of fabric, of course, all made out of fabric. And what ends up happening is, you know, they absorb a lot of sweat, and, you know, they can kind of be bent in certain ways, and then they kind of start keeping creases. But I gotta say, I was really surprised. Just the material that they use, to me, I mean, it's just a lot more pliable and softer, instead of that more stiff feel. I mean, because sometimes really you want to look for the stiff NATO because you feel like that's going to give you the quality. It's going to be tougher. But these are actually very soft and very strong, which is really nice. And it also is comfortable because, you know, if I wear it a little bit tighter, it's just going to give me a little bit more flex. So I don't have to wear it loose to where now my watch is going to be banging around. I can wear it tighter, but still have that nice flexibleness to it, and also breathability, which is really cool. And then with the rings being more narrow and kind of, you know, and also being polished, it definitely adds a little bit more class to it versus, you know, the average NATO, which is more toolish. So I think that's really cool. And it works really well with this type of watch. So let's go ahead and pull this off, and which I think this is a really cool combination. It is a navy blue with brown center stripes, which is really cool. I think it really suits the kind of nautical theme that you're going to see here. Keeps the watch fun and playful and very summery. So that's really cool. And then, you know, I'll swap out a couple straps there. But let's also go ahead and take a look at, you know, the Mako USA 2 on this really cool blue kind of camouflage strap, you know. Now, this isn't really a design that I would go out and search for, but I gotta say, seeing it, you know, kind of in the flesh, it's actually pretty cool. I think it hits, you know, some of those blue tones and hues really nicely, and it kind of makes it versatile to where it can be worn on a number of kind of blue toned watches, which I have many of, as you know. So let's go ahead and get this on the wrist here. So this is one of the cool things about NATO straps is, so if you're wearing it, of course, on a more sporty watch, it has a little bit more security. And let me explain what that means, because I think a lot of people kind of talk about that extra safety and security on NATOs, but you know, not everybody always really fleshes out that kind of idea and why it actually is more secure to wear your watch on a NATO strap, which makes it, you know, that much more secure. So A little difficult with my glove there, but you know. Okay, let's push that through. Perfect. And then lay it nicely. Bam. Okay. So basically it's held through these two spring bar holes, right? So if, let's say, one of these spring bars fail, because let's face it, that's probably the weakest point in a watch, is the spring bar. If one of those fail, it's still going to be connected by this spring bar. So if it flops off, this band is still going to be intact, right? It's still going to be on your wrist. So let's go ahead and take a look. So let's say the spring bar fails, and all right, so it's on your wrist, but if it's on your wrist and it's held by one, it's not going anywhere, right? That's not going to fall to the bottom of the ocean or hit the concrete if this falls off, because it's still held on by one. So basically, the band itself being secured is not reliant on the spring bars being secured, which is not the case for, you know, a regular watch strap, because they're just connected right here. There's no, the only thing connecting the two ends of the straps is the watch case. So once that becomes, you know, if that ever fails, now the strap's gone, the other end is connected here, and it's just gonna flop off, right? So the very cool thing for NATO straps is that that's, you know, you get that extra security, which is really nice. I haven't had too many issues with spring bars, but I've definitely heard some stories. So I think it's really cool it gives you a little bit of peace of mind, and you know, it allows you to kind of go out and be active and kind of not worry about your watch as much, which is very cool. So let's go ahead and actually pop this off, and you can see here how easy it is to take a strap out, and like I said, like new when you pull it off, which is very cool. And you know, just kind of a general, you know, strap talk here. When you switch out different bands, it really changes the personality of the watch. So, you know, before it kind of had this very fun nautical, you know, kind of on a boat type theme, right, with the color and the layout, the little strap, the stripes, I should say, down the middle. But now with the green, now it almost has like a military feel to it, right? This could almost be like a field watch type, especially since it's fully numeraled. And you know, it's just, the watch is very versatile, and then the strap even adds to that, and I think that's really, really cool. So I think that's a great combination. And then let's go ahead and go through a couple others. And as you can see, right, it's, once it's in there, it's not like it's going to move around. You really have to apply force. So you just pull it out here, which helps it. And then let's say, you know, here on this nice khaki color, now it's going to have a different feel to it, you know, and can kind of be worn with other things, right? Really, this is kind of the most vanilla option. But even then, you know, hey, it's going to match with your khakis, but at the same time, it's not going to clash with anything either, right? It's going to kind of go with everything, and it ties in, and kind of, you know, I think it plays really well with the light dial, with the light strap. So very nice, right? And then of course, because of this hardware is, you know, a little bit more dressy, it can kind of go either way, right? Like you could see this underneath, you know, white collar cuff, but at the same time, it can be worn with a t-shirt, which is really cool. And then of course we have the classic brown, which is nice because I normally keep this watch on a leather strap. So very cool to be able to kind of have that same versatility as far as the colorways. But now have it on a NATO, which is breathable and very cheap, and I can beat up, versus some leather straps can get pretty expensive, and you kind of want to take care of them. And of course, during the hot summer, you don't really want to be sweating on a leather strap. It's definitely a lot nicer to have it on a NATO. It's more breathable. Of course, I really enjoy wearing, you know, my watch is on bracelet, but of course, not every watch has a really high quality bracelet, so it's nice to be able to put it on something with some quality. So very cool. And now let's kind of talk about some of the options for the Orient Mako USA 2. So I think it looks really cool on this option here with the kind of sky blue pattern, but let's take it off wrist here. Okay. And, you know, a very bright color. Can put it on the red, which ties it to some of those little red hues. This is really nice as far as, you know, a fun splash of color for the summertime. You know, I feel like it's one of those colors where you wouldn't really go out and hunt for it. But when you see it, I think with the way it contrasts against the blue, it's really cool, and it just ties in, you know, especially since today is Sunday. There's the nice little red Sunday text there, and of course that's the same on Seiko's, so that also works. Then we have the little red tipped seconds hand. So I think that looks really cool. Nice high contrast piece, and really adds a splash of color, because of course the blue on a blue dial diver's watch, especially when it's that sunburst, it can be very subdued. You know, indoors it's going to look like a black dial. It's really only in the sun are you going to see that, you know, the blue kind of sunray dial illuminate there. So it's nice to actually have a little splash of color that isn't dependent on the way that the sun and the light is going to reflect on it. So very cool there. And then of course, this is actually a really cool tone of blue. So most of the ones you're gonna find are either going to be very dark navy blue or a very bright royal blue. And I feel like this kind of hits the sweet spot in that kind of royal blue spectrum, and that it's not super bright, but it's still very much a blue color, right? It's not gonna look like black from far away. It looks blue. And when the light hits this, you know, it really ties right into that tone, which is really nice. So, you know, of course it's a little batchy as far as the color, but because it is a more of a bright blue, I feel like it still is pretty nice, because it only really, once the dial catches the light, will it match perfectly. But otherwise it's gonna just be a nice, again, pop of color that isn't necessarily dependent on the light to really have that high contrast appeal, which is really cool. Okay, then let's go ahead and end this little NATO tour on this guy right here. So I'm a big fan of gray NATOs. I just think that they're very versatile. Of course, you know, the color of metal is gray. But there's a lot of different tones that are out there and a lot of different hues. Oh, I missed it. So it's nice to find one that's kind of in between. Again, this is a very cool tone that they use that you don't see all the time. It has a couple of hints of kind of a golden hue to it in the light. It's bright, it's not super dark. You know, I normally really like Admiralty gray, which is a very dark gray with kind of a blue hue to it. But then there's also really bright grays that are, you know, that almost have it's just very clean, where there's not really any hints of color. It's just a very pure light gray. The thing that I like about this particular gray is that it has those kind of gold tones in the sheen of the material, and it really gives it that kind of vintage worn in look, right? Which I think a lot of people, of course, are trying to achieve when they put on their watch on a NATO strap, is that they want it to kind of have that personalized vintage feel. And honestly, if you see somebody wearing a NATO strap on their watch, chances are they actually really are watch fans. So that's already something that can help break the ice for a conversation starter, because your average person is not going to put their watch on a NATO, you know, unless it came with a NATO. That's, you know, that's completely understandable. But for the most part, you know, if they have their watch on a NATO, I'd say 9 times out of 10 they're going to be a watch fan. So let's go ahead and just leave that there because the colors look great. Now, one other feature which I really thought was cool about these is that as far as the way the hardware is secured, the rings are actually stitched in and the holes are heat sealed, which is pretty cool. So let's go ahead and get that up here. If we can get it to focus. So, you know, one of the things you want to look for is, of course, the quality of the stitching on NATOs. And as you can see, these are just really nicely done. And then the holes themselves also have a nice heat treat. So it really is kind of the best of both worlds. You'll see some that are bonded, and if we can get to focus again, and you know, and that's kind of where it's at. And of course, those are less durable. Then you'll also see some, you know, for the majority, you'll see many that are stitched. But to kind of have both, I think is really nice. It's just kind of an extra layer of security, and it just goes, you know, kind of keeps within that premium feel I think that they were really going for. So I know that the hardware can be a bit polarizing. Some people, when they want a NATO, they want a NATO. When they want a Zulu, they want a Zulu. But for everybody else, I think it's just a really cool option for something that's just a little bit more versatile and you know, a little bit more dressy. So I think that's really cool, because if I put it on a sports watch, it's going to dress it up a little bit. If I put it on kind of a more dressy watch, it's just going to tie in with it, right? So the only thing that's polished on this watch is this bezel here that comes around, and now I have these kind of other hints of polish that are going to tie into it. So, you know, I just think that's cool, and I think it's really well done, and I applaud Wrist Candy Watch Club for getting these out, especially at these prices. Very cool. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. You know, do you guys want to see more strap related videos? You know, I definitely have a huge collection of different watch straps and types. So hopefully I'll be able to get some more content like that. I definitely am always open to suggestions. So go ahead and post suggestions down below. And if you haven't already, please hit like and subscribe. And I'll see you guys next time. Thanks.